If you've been through an IVF cycle that wasn't successful, or you have a cycle coming up, then this episode today is for you. I'm speaking with a special guest who will walk you through everything you need to know before you begin IVF, what to ask your doctor along the way, and how to increase your chances of success. All of that and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Journey to Fertility. Welcome to your Journey to Fertility. This is the podcast that blends science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so that you can stop stressing that you'll never have your baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast. Welcome back to Your Journey to Fertility. Now, I am so excited to bring you this episode today because my guest is someone that I wish I had known when I was struggling with infertility. Lucy Lyons has such a unique background of experience. She's an embryologist. She worked within fertility clinics for many years. She has qualifications in reproductive science and is a specialist in the fields of embryo development and preconception health. She's the founder of Two Lines Fertility. She's a public speaker and an author. But on top of all of her professional experience, Lucy also went through her own personal 10-year battle with infertility and recurrent pregnancy loss. She realized the importance of information and education, and she turned her grief into empowerment and a career that supports couples who are now walking the path that she once did. Lucy is outspoken, she is extremely thorough in what she does, and she's exactly the person you want in your corner if you're considering or undergoing IVF. So let's get into it. Here is Lucy. Lucy, I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like I see you and talk to you every day, but I don't. It's because I see your face and your amazing wisdom on social media so often. But to have you here almost in person with me over Zoom is just awesome. So thank you. Can we start off just for anyone who doesn't know you, which, I find hard to believe, can you talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
So I call myself a independent embryologist, fertility educator and IVF patient advocate. These days I've added speaker and author onto the end of there, but, I basically trained as a clinical embryologist many moons ago, nearly 25 years ago, worked clinically for a long time in Australia, the UK, Ireland, and then worked for a company that manufactures and markets products to IVF clinics, and then back to an IVF clinic in a sales and marketing role for an IVF clinic. In that process, I learned three really important things. One is that the average GP, and there will be GPs who come at me, but the average GP knows very little about fertility, and that was never made more clear to me than when I was visiting GPs as part of my job. One. Two is that general knowledge of fertility is really very, very low. We're not given enough information about how our bodies work at high school, and the assumption of where your general knowledge sits is incorrect. The assumption that doctors make about where your general knowledge about fertility sits is generally incorrect. And thirdly, that IVF is really, really big business. It's much like wedding is to floristry or to anything. You put the word bridal in front of your business name and you can immediately charge 3 times as much. You put the word fertility in front of your business name and suddenly, people are paying hand over fist for stuff. So almost 7 years ago now, I was made redundant from my sales and marketing role at a large IVF clinic because they couldn't see the direct financial link between educating GPs and their shareholder dividends. And so I went, that's the final nail in the coffin for me. I need to step back and actually go back to how IVF was when I started my training, which was not for profit, and go back to actually helping people and sitting back at the coalface and trying to help people build their general knowledge up to a baseline and support them through infertility.
And I think the thing that is so remarkable remarkable about you is that you did all of this training. Well, there's a lot of things that are remarkable about you, Lucy, but you did all of this training and, you were a scientist for so long and you worked in clinics for such a long time, well before you even had your own fertility concerns as well. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your own personal journey with infertility?
Always happy to do that because I think it's important to help people realise that everybody's dealing with something. I have a history of recurrent miscarriage. So my husband and I were married. He was previously married, has 3 children from a previous relationship. So he was happy to have more children if that's what happened, but not happy to take extra measures to make that happen. So he put the line in the sand very early in our relationship that if we were lucky enough to have children, that he would welcome that with open arms, but that he would never embark on any kind of fertility treatment, which was very challenging for me because I was obviously working in the space, but I had to respect that boundary. It took us 12 months to conceive the first pregnancy, and we lost that pregnancy at 13 weeks with a spontaneous bleed, which was possibly the most traumatic experience of my life. I was living in Sweden. I was a long way away from my family. He was my only support. My husband and his 3 children were really the only people that I had around me. It was, early 2000s or, mid noughties. So there was not nearly as much access to FaceTime and connection to people. It was phone calls. And so that was really challenging. It took us another 12 months to conceive again. And that girl is turning 14 next month. So she worked. And then we probably started trying for a second child when she was about 6 or 8 months old, and had a series of miscarriages over the next 6 years. Eventually decided we were done, we were fine, we were happy as a family of 3, and we were going to make measures to make sure that I didn't get pregnant again. And there was a bit of a delay in those proceedings, and as we hear so often and makes people want to punch you in the head, I then did have a spontaneous conception at 43 and a half years old. My husband was 59 at the time. It was a very challenging experience, but he will be turning 7 in April. So there's 7 years and 2 days between my children, and 5 out of my ever many other miscarriages I had were all due in the last, in that same time, that last week of April, first week of May. So, which coincidentally is when Mother's Day sits as well. So yes, alongside making families for everybody else, I was having a lot of trouble making my own. And I actually reached a point with the recurrent miscarriages where I actually didn't even tell my husband that I thought I might be pregnant, because it was just, I think I was terrified that he was going to say, we have to just stop, because I knew that he didn't, that he wasn't quite as invested in it as I was. He was, but I think I was too scared to tell him how hard I found it, for fear of him saying, okay, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again, because I can't watch you go through this again. And I think a lot of my clients feel the same way about IVF. We've had 5 cycles and I'm fine, everything's fine, we just keep doing it, we're fine, because they're terrified to actually say, I'm not fine, in case someone says you have to stop. And that's not an option.
No. And for so many of us, it is not an option.
It's not an option. But then what happens is you push down that grief and that fear and that worry and all of that stuff, and it just sits deeper and deeper and deeper in you. And it's taken a long time to process that. Mm-hmm. And I think certainly the work that I do now is helping me too to process that, because I'm talking about it all day, every day. It's part of every consultation, not my own experience. I don't tell my story in every consultation, but it's the experience that I have fuels the conversations that I can have with my clients. I see it from a different perspective.
Of course. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm so sorry for all of the loss and the heartbreak.
It's a long time ago now, and it kind of feels like a distant past memory, but I remember my father's a GP obstetrician, and I remember him saying to me when I had my first miscarriage, this is devastating, this is traumatic, and this is trauma, full stop. You will always remember this weekend, how the room smelt, where you looked, everything that was on the walls, how you felt, what the sofa looked like. Every single little piece of this day will stay in your memory, but it won't stay in anybody else's memory, and that's okay. It won't even stay in your husband's memory. He'll sort of remember it, but not really. But you will always remember the due date and the weekend that it happened and everything about that. And he's right, I will always. And less so as the miscarriages went on, but I think it's really important. It was a very important thing that he gave me then, was that recognition that that was a traumatic experience, and the knowledge not to expect the same from other people, just to hold that myself and to find a way to process that myself and manage my expectations with other people. So, sorry, that was a bit of an aside, but yeah.
No, and I think a lot of us can relate to that. The being in the room, the smells of what's around you. We have been there.
Yep.
So the topic of this episode is about what happens when IVF doesn't work.
Yes.
And I think so many of your clients and patients that come to you, as well as my students, and myself included, you look at IVF as this kind of beacon of hope at the end of a very dark tunnel. You think nothing has worked, but finally I can do IVF. And that's the thing that I need.
And I'll just do IVF.
Just do IVF. Exactly. In inverted commas.
Fine, I'll give in. I'll do IVF.
Can you talk a little bit about the disconnect between why it isn't the answer? Always.
Yes. It's a tricky one because I define myself by being an embryologist. I love IVF. I think IVF is awesome. It's so cool that what we can do and the things that can happen inside the IVF lab are amazing. But the IVF lab can only create embryos from the raw materials that they're given. And it is amazing. I'm trying to think where I'm taking this thought process. But if we end up at IVF, if we found ourselves at IVF, we need to really look at how we got there and why we're doing it. So if we got there because we've had an ectopic and we've got a blocked tube, or two tubes removed, we've had two ectopics and they've both been removed, well, there is no choice but to do IVF. We have to do IVF. And the reason we're doing IVF is to jump the hurdle of the tube bit. So that one's kind of obvious. And so then we go, okay, well, IVF should solve that problem because it's jumping a hurdle. Likewise, if we have a semen analysis and there's not enough sperm for natural conception to happen, the standard response then is, that's okay, we'll just do IVF with ICSI. Because we're jumping the hurdle. We can jump the hurdle of not enough sperm by just doing ICSI, where we just take a single sperm and inject that into a single egg. Awesome. What's often not covered in that situation is, but why? Why is the sperm count low? And is there anything we can do about that before we do IVF? And so I think there's a lot of things in the beforehand that don't get covered. Because people tend to do this bit in a vacuum, and then they might spend 3 years doing this bit before they're brave enough to ask a doctor for help. And by the time they get to the doctor and ask for help, they want IVF. They actually want it, even though we say nobody wants IVF. Trust me, if you've ever done IVF, you would go back and change it and not do it if you could. But by the time they ask the question, they want it, and so a lot of this stuff gets missed. So what I would like is for people to find me earlier here and improve their general knowledge around how their body functions, and can they change their how they ovulate. Maybe ovulation is the hurdle. Maybe it's unexplained. There's no good reason. Maybe they did ask a doctor and they had a semen analysis and they had some hormone profiling done and everything seems to be fine, and IVF is the next thing. But what's been missed is all of that preparation for conception and the reducing your exposure to toxins and the looking after all your hormones and all this other stuff that gets missed. And so I think there are a lot of different reasons why people come to IVF, and IVF is not always the answer. I think we need to spend a whole lot more time in this space beforehand and then go to IVF.
So if we are talking about that space, which is so important, and it's such, when we're thinking about a lifetime of having children, it's such a short season and short phase of your life. Can you talk about why it's so important and go into a little bit of detail around what we need to be looking at?
So as you're preparing for a cycle of IVF, people and by people I mean doctors and nurses and people inside IVF clinics, will be saying, that's fine, we do this all the time, it's easy, you just follow the instructions, you just do the injections on these days, and don't panic too much about what comes next, because we'll just tell you as you need to know, and you just go through it, and it's fine. Thousands of women have IVF. Every classroom's got a child born from an IVF cycle in it. It's fine, you'll be fine. And then you sort of get into it, and it's much harder than you thought it was going to be. And actually you want a whole lot more information about what's going on and what are you doing with my eggs anyway, and how do I, and then they start asking you questions and getting you to make decisions. And, do you want to do this or this? I don't even know what this or this is, let alone why I might do one or the other. And then you're already in the cycle and you have to make the decision today and you don't have the information. And so I think one of the main things people need to do in this time is to actually understand the process. What is actually going to happen when I have IVF? Not just, you'll have injections for a couple of weeks and then we'll take your eggs and then we'll put them in the lab and then we'll transfer an embryo. But how are you going to take the eggs? Who is going to be in the room? What could go wrong? What could go right? What does a follicle scan? You don't even know what questions to ask because you don't know what's going to happen. You might be asked on day 9 of your stimulation protocol, there's only 3 follicles. Do you want to do IUI or IVF? You're like, I don't even know what IUI, what is IUI anyway? What? So I think understanding the actual process of IVF and what decisions you might need to make along the way is really important. And then I think it's important to recognise that the egg that you're collecting on egg collection day has actually already been growing for 3 months before you're born with it. It's been in your body all your life, but it was recruited towards this time, this day, about 3 months ago. And in those 3 months before the egg collection, it's really susceptible to everything you're doing. So if you are working a very highly stressed job and you're working 8 till 8 and you're having KFC on the way home and then you're having a few wines on Friday night because life's really stressful, and then on Saturday you do a 20-kilometre marathon run, and you go to the gym at 10 o'clock at night 3 times a week and do high intensity exercise because that's the only way you can get your exercise, and none of those things are helpful for egg development. And as you say, it is such a short season in the grand scheme of things that even though you've turned up at your doctor and gone, I just want IVF right now, if you're forking out 10 grand for your IVF, just put in the 3 months of prep beforehand and find someone who can support you through that preparation and make sure that they understand what's going on physiologically in that time as the eggs are developing. Likewise, as the sperm's developing. Sperm takes 70 days to produce, 72 days. 76 if you ask some people, but I round it up to 3 months because it works nicely with the eggs. And you can both be preparing for 3 months leading into that cycle.
And there is so much that we need to consider. And you touched a little bit around a lot of the things that I work on with my students, because, this whole idea of stress is a very big one. And, we need to be really clear that stress is a physiological reaction that happens within the body. Your adrenals are pumping out these stress hormones, and there are so many things that we can do to make this worse. Like you said, going on 20-kilometre runs, doing high intensity interval training late at night, having takeaway on the way home, going for long periods without eating, all of these things, not getting enough sleep. That really does have a flow-on effect. And, the cortisol levels can affect the hormone balances within your body, and it can affect the quality of the eggs and the sperm as well.
Correct.
What else do you find that people have just no idea about?
I'm really big on the endocrine disrupting chemicals. And when I start saying that, I can see people's eyes glaze over and they're like, oh my God, another person talking about bloody toxins. There is so much evidence now that particularly plastics, so there's a lot of discussion around BPA. BPA is one in a family of bisphenols, and any product that is BPA free will just have BPS or BPF in it, which are actually just as bad. So much evidence around the impact that BPA has on egg quality, on embryo development, on miscarriage rates, on stillbirth rates. evidence of men who smoke in the 3 months before conception. The children born from that conception have a higher incidence of childhood cancers. I'd be buggered if I'm going through IVF to have it sit by my child's bedside while they're, no, thank you, that's not happening. So just stop smoking, full stop, simple, really easy for me to say. But get help to do that if you need it. But I think the biggest thing that people don't know is that they have a semen analysis and they're told it's fine. And so all the focus goes back to the woman. And the guy goes, well, my swimmers were fine. And he keeps going out and having beers with his mates and vaping and living his normal life. And she's taking armfuls of supplements every day and trying to do absolutely everything in her power to try and make this work. And he just keeps saying my semen analysis was fine. Or conversely, my semen analysis wasn't fine, but we're doing ICSI anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I think we're learning more about the impact that sperm health and sperm functionality has on embryo development and implantation and ongoing pregnancy rates, that we just can't neglect the sperm preparation anymore, or the preparation for the 3 months before the sperm anymore. We can't forget that. I think that's the biggest thing.
And for some reason, we tend to forget that it is literally 50% of an embryo, and how it gets pushed to the sidelines is beyond me. So thank you for reiterating that. And it is not something to be overlooked.
Definitely not.
This is a big question, and it really depends, I guess, on why your IVF cycle may not have been successful.
Yep.
But what kind of testing or tests can we ask doctors or other healthcare practitioners for if we are going to go through another cycle?
Well, it depends a little bit on what's happened in previous cycles. And it also, I think we live in a culture where we want to quantify everything and we want to test everything and we want to make sure we've got all the ducks in a row before we do anything. And I think what I would love to reiterate is there's just so much about fertility that we cannot explain. So, when I talk about fertility doctors and the testing they do, I often talk about like a marketing bell curve. And when Apple release a new iPhone, there's always some people here who are camping out the front of the store waiting to get the first new phone. And then most people have the new phone when most people get the new phone. And then there are some people camped out here who's still running an iPhone 6, even though the 15's been released, because it still kind of works and it's fine. Right? The same goes for fertility doctors. There are some fertility doctors who are out here, they're camped out here at the research end of things, and any new test or whiff of anything new that they can run, they'll do. Now, I think there's potential hazards with that because often the tests that they're doing are untested. There's no validation behind them. They're new, they're research-based. Now, that doctor is either doing that test because they just want to gather more information, in which case it should be a research project and it should be free, or they genuinely think that it might actually help you. They just don't know. Okay, maybe. Or they're just running every single test under the sun because they can charge you for them and they know how vulnerable you are and that they can test you for stuff, right? I tend to send people mostly to doctors that sit somewhere here on the curve who are keeping an eye on the new research, but they're not jumping into it with both feet straight away. They're waiting to see until there's a bit more evidence, and they're a bit more careful about who they do different tests with. It's not just a blanket, everybody gets this new thing. And I tend to avoid the doctors who are sitting out here who are going, no, we'll just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again because it works for most people and it'll probably work for you eventually. Right? So there's sort of a happy medium in there. What specific tests depend very much on what your history is and what's been going on. I think we can over-test. Like sperm DNA fragmentation tests, there's a lot of talk about that at the moment. We all need to do it. It's amazing, blah, blah, blah. I'm a bit on the fence about that one. I think the risk is that we do the test and we get another all clear, but maybe the test wasn't deep enough or careful enough or sensitive enough to pick up some potential issues. And maybe by doing the test, we've given him another free pass to not change anything. If we don't do the test, we can say this might be an issue, and it's really easy for you to add some nuts to your diet and maybe reduce your alcohol, and maybe you could actually be part of this process of creating a baby rather than just testing and getting a free pass to carry on doing whatever you want.
Mm.
Also, then, so that's just one test. But, the Emma and Alice tests, which are also new tests, I think have a bit of merit because they're looking at the endometrial microbiome and what's actually happening inside the endometrium. And I think that's quite a useful thing to know. I think that would be a really useful thing to do before we did any IVF. I think that might be a GP level kind of test because maybe you can conceive spontaneously if the endometrial environment is right. What can we do about it if we find a problem? Well, you end up with either some antibiotics or some probiotics, hopefully not both at the same time. I did have a client the other day who was taking both at the same time. I'm like, why? What are we doing here? This is not helpful. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of things. As I said, there are some doctors who camp right out here, and I'm not a big fan of that because I think it's a little bit like your GP doing an MRI when you've got a headache because you might have a brain tumour. And, yeah, you might have a brain tumour, but you also might just need a bit more sleep and a bit more water and a bit more, gentleness.
A bit more TLC. I think that's really good advice. And this idea of overtesting, I was a chronic overtester and I did every functional test under the sun. And I think there's some merit in a lot of them, but the more you investigate, the more you're going to find things and the more that there is for you then to freak out about and stress about and then have to address. And that's another thing on your list. And there is a balance in there, and I don't exactly know where that balance is.
Well, I think it's really important to keep remembering, whilst infertility is completely shit, don't get me wrong, 80% of people will conceive spontaneously after 12 months of trying. And after another 12 months of trying, another 5% of people will conceive spontaneously. So by the time you get right down here, that's your 80% and then more. And then there's another bunch that will conceive in the first cycle of IVF. And, maybe you are actually right down here in the bottom and you need mitochondrial transplant, something or other, blah, 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 maybe. But the likelihood is that actually you belong somewhere much higher up in this funnel if you just cut yourself some slack. And if we actually took some of these 80% of people who conceive spontaneously without even thinking about it and ran all these tests on them, I guarantee you we would find things that were not right. 100% guarantee it. And you have to remember, and this is where I put my cynical hat on a little bit, but you have to remember what I said right at the beginning. Infertility and fertility is really big business. There are so many people out there who are going to convince you that some test that they have is the test to do that's going to prove whether you'll ever have a baby or not. And it's fine. It's only $2,000 and it's simple. And there's another $2,000 you've done. And it comes back that actually you do just need this. It's really tricky, but you just need this one. I can't tell you exactly what's in it, but it's a special supplement and it's only going to cost you $100 a week to take, but it's going to solve this problem that we just uncovered. And I kid you not, those people exist. And you just need to pull back and give yourself a little bit of slack. And just go, okay, what I actually need to do here is just calm TF down a little bit for a minute. Find a way to do that. You can't do that on your own. I'm not telling you to just relax. I'm telling you to just give yourself some TLC, cut yourself some slack. This is shit. It's hard. It's awful. And you've got to find a balance somewhere.
That is by far the most overlooked thing. Because you're in this space when it comes to IVF where, it's already affected your relationship, your month-to-month cycles. It's, your hormones are going out of whack because you're so stressed and so anxious.
And you're living in this 2-week cycle of hope and grief and hope and grief and hope and grief and hope and grief. And the pits of grief get deeper and the hope gets higher and then the pit gets deeper and then you don't let yourself hope, but the pit's still really deep. And then you're only ever in the pit because you never see the hope because you think it's going to be too big a slide down to the grief again. And it's really shit. And I think the most important thing is to get someone on your team who can help you to manage that shit. And it's not mindset and it's not think positive and it's not just relax or any of that kind of shit. It's actually someone who can functionally help you carry this load. And so you're not running. I had a client yesterday who had I asked her a question. She went, oh, yeah, I've got that somewhere here. And she's rifling through all these bits of paper. She was carrying like the UN Peace Force on her desk. She had that much information. And I said, I just want you to pull it all into one pile, put it in a folder, and put the folder away just for a day. Pull it out again tomorrow and have a look at it, but then put it away again. Don't have it sitting everywhere all the time, because then I know it's all you think about, but then it's all you see as well.
Totally. The mental load of infertility, which falls 99% of the time on a woman, is immense. Thank you for pointing all of that out. This is a question that's probably something that we've already touched on, things that we're addressing if a cycle isn't successful. But what kind of things should we be speaking to our doctor about? Not necessarily after the cycle hasn't worked, but before we get there. And you mentioned before about explaining what the actual process is. I went through IVF at 3 different clinics in 3 different countries, and there was only one that sat me down and explained what the process was and what was going to be happening from day to day. So can you share a few of the things that we should be asking our doctors and medical team?
The first most important thing is, how do I contact you if I need to? Or is there someone that I can contact if I need to? So overwhelmingly, the biggest question I get from my IVF support clients is, oh my God, this has happened. I don't know who to call. I don't know how to contact anybody. Right? So that's the very first really important question. And most clinics should have a 24-hour phone number where there will be a nurse on call to answer that call. And that's perfect for emergencies. And you need to make sure you've got that phone number front and centre on all your notes, and you know exactly who to call. And then you need to know who to call when you've just got 4 or 5 questions and it's not an emergency. It's not a 10 o'clock at night thing. It's just I need more information about that. Who can I call? Is there a place that you recommend that I find the extra information that I want? I understand you don't have time in this 20 minutes to explain this massive, great big thing to me, but is there somewhere I can go to find that information, or someone I can talk to find that information? Hi, it's me. But also the clinic will have someone they might have someone who can do that, or some of the doctors that I work closely with will give patients their phone number and say, just call me whenever. I may not answer, but I'll call you back when and if I can, or I'll get someone to call you back who can help you. So I think that's a really important thing to ask. And then, is there anything that I can do that might make a difference to the outcomes? Most doctors will say, no, it's all set in stone, there's nothing you can do, which is not true. And again, hi, it's me or you, or, there's a few people around who can help you with that, because there actually is a shitload you can do there. And when you're advocating for yourself, make sure, if you've read about something, who am I kidding? Everyone's in Facebook forums and they've got, all sorts of people giving them information and advice, and you want to check it with your doctor. So when you check it with your doctor and say, I was reading about this thing, is that for me? And they say, no, it's not. If you really want to know more about it, make sure you say, is there any reason why I wouldn't do that? And turn the question around. Like I get a lot of clients who ask their doctor about acupuncture. Should I do acupuncture? No, I wouldn't bother. And then but if you turn it around and say, is there any reason why I wouldn't do acupuncture, why I shouldn't do acupuncture, that turns it around, and the doctor can go, oh, well, no, actually there's no evidence about it either way. So if you want to do it, you can do it. And that kind of changes the frame of things. So I think it's really important to use that self-advocacy skill of, ovarian PRP. Should I have ovarian PRP? No, it's not worth it. End of question. Is there any reason why I wouldn't do it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, actually, and it makes the doctor think about, actually, it's invasive. It's not what you need. It's, whatever. They're going to give you a bit more information.
That is fantastic advice. And I feel like we put doctors up on this tall pedestal where everything they say is gospel and we just have to do as they say. But really, at the end of the day, they are working for you and they are there to help you.
Fertility is so different from any other area of medicine. You're not going to go to a knee reconstructive surgeon and say, now, I was in a forum about knee reconstructions and I've read about this different way that you can, actually do the reconstruction. I wonder if that might be something. You're not going to do that. Yet in the fertility space, people do that. And unfortunately, I think there's quite a line, there's a bit of a blurry line there where that actually becomes dangerous. And I have people coming to me saying, my doctor just won't do this thing and I really want it. And I'm like, because it's not going to be useful for you because of these reasons. But I have an hour where I can explain that to people. So it's easier for me. The doctor's just going to say no. And then you're going to hate the doctor and you're going to go to a different doctor. And, then the next doctor's going to go, oh, fine, I'll just do it. And then, so then the doctor gets a bad name for doing stuff that's not necessary. It's a very, very tricky space. So that's why it's important to, yes, trust your doctor. But if you're starting to trust Google and Facebook forums more than you trust your doctor, you need a new doctor. And you need a doctor that you can relate to, that can help you feel confident enough with, that you can turn off Facebook forums and the Google searches and turn them off and not listen to them anymore, because they're really not serving you. In those Facebook forums, we tend to put our own value system onto every single person who's commenting. So we just imagine that they're another Lucy Lyon sitting at the other end of the screen and they have the same values as we do. But maybe actually if we saw them face to face, we wouldn't even ask them if they wanted a cup of tea, let alone what we should do about our IVF cycle. So I think it's really important to be very careful about where you get your information.
I know that all comes back to finding someone that they can speak to, like yourself.
Gosh, I talk too much. I'm sorry.
You do not talk too much.
Podcast though, so I'm allowed to.
That's why we're here, so that you can talk. Lucy, where are most people on their journey when they come to you?
Really vary. A girl I spoke to this morning is 32. She's considering freezing her eggs. She hasn't got a partner. What should she think about? Her doctor's already told her nothing at all and just, do 2 weeks of injections and Bob's your uncle. Right through to the couple who I've got a piece of paper sitting here on the other half of my screen here, and they've had 5 egg collections and no one's ever talked to them about toxins. They just don't understand what's happened. They, how the hell did we end up here? They've got 3 embryos in the freezer, 2 PGT tested abnormal, 1 with a mosaic. What even is a mosaic? What do I do about that? A client last week who's got 3 mosaics in the freezer and they're different kinds of mosaics, and what do they mean? I didn't have the answer for her, so I called in a friend of mine who's a genetic counsellor and asked the questions with her. So all different stages of the journey, from just starting out right through to, oh my God, do we move to donor eggs, or is it time to stop, or all that. And the reason that piece of paper stuck up there is because I need to create a spreadsheet of all of her treatment so that I can go to a couple of friends of mine who are fertility doctors and take the spreadsheet and say, okay, what's your opinion on this? And I can get 3 doctors' opinions for her and then go back to her and say, okay, well, this doctor said this one said this one said this. And, out of that, this is what that means. This is what you could do about it. This is where you can find some more information, and they're ready to receive your call when you're ready to go, whoever you want to choose. So, yeah, long answer to a short question, but all different stages.
So when someone comes to you and they are in that place where their treatment hasn't been successful, what are the steps that you go through? Like, what are the first few things that you get them to look at, and where do you go from there?
The very first thing I get them to do is to tell me their entire story from beginning to end. How did we end up at IVF in the first place? What brought us to that point? Who did you see? Because I know most of the doctors in Australia and I sort of know what their MO is. So there's a few I don't know, but who did you see and what did they say? What was the treatment? Gather all of that information. Then I get them to request their embryology reports from the team, and I'll screen share with them and go through the embryology notes, and we'll see exactly what the follicles look like and how many eggs were collected and how many were mature and how many were fertilized and what they look like on day 3 or what they look like on day 5. And that takes an hour to go through that, because we want to really dig into the timing. Was the timing all right in everything that happened throughout the cycle? When you take your trigger injection, we have to collect those eggs at 36 hours. But what lots of people don't know is that egg has to meet the sperm within 42 hours of the trigger injection. So we've only got a short window of time in there to make sure that that bit happens. And then once we've put the sperm and the eggs together, we have to check them for fertilization within 16 to 18 hours after that. So that's got to happen then. And if we check them too late, we're not going to see what we need to see. And if we check them too early, we're not going to see what we need to see. And then we expect them to be at certain stages at certain time points along that journey. And if they're not at those time points, at the times we expect them to be, then that gives us information about what might be going wrong. So earlier we were talking about, when might we go to IVF, and I was talking about, if there's no ovulation or no tubes or whatever. IVF sometimes used as a diagnostic as well. If we've got the timing right and we know you're ovulating and we know there are sperm and you're still not getting pregnant, the problem obviously lies after that. So then we need to get those eggs into the lab and those sperm into the lab and see what happens. Give them an apprenticeship. We don't know what's going to happen because there's no way of knowing. So the point of doing IVF is to try to find where it's gone wrong. And if it then does go wrong, sometimes that's actually a good thing. It's not a great thing when it comes to trying to have a baby, obviously, but if you get complete failure to fertilize, we go, okay, that cycle really sucked. But also now we know why you haven't been conceiving. So we can make a choice now about what we do about that. Do we go ahead and do another cycle using ICSI this time, or do we add some calcium ionophore, or do we do something else, try a different method of ICSI, piezo ICSI or PICSI or some other method to try and get the fertilization? And if we get fertilization but they don't develop, well, maybe then we need to troubleshoot what went wrong there. And if they're developing beautifully but they're not implanting, then maybe there's something wrong there. So it depends a lot on what's happened in that time, and that's why that between cycle review is 3 sessions with me and all the support that goes around that, because there's a lot to explain that your doctor can't possibly get to in the 20-minute review appointment when actually all they're going to do is write your prescription for the drugs for the next cycle.
I think that's the thing people just don't want to hear, is that your first round, or even perhaps your first or second round, it's kind of a test.
I think it's better to view it as being diagnostic. I mean, we don't know how you're going to respond to the medication to stimulate your ovaries, so that we need to tweak that, because everybody responds differently to the medication. And so we don't know how you're going to respond. We have some ideas about how you might respond, but we don't know for sure. So that's the first thing. Secondly, if you haven't been conceiving spontaneously, there's something not right. Right? Now, if you've got eggs and you've got sperm and the pathways are clear and we know you're getting the timing right, we're going to have trouble with IVF. There's going to be something in that IVF that's going to show us what's going on eventually. And it might not in the first cycle, but, if we collect 10 eggs and they're all mature and they all fertilize and they all grow to day 5, why are we doing IVF? We don't want it to be perfect when we do it, because it doesn't answer anything. And so why is it going to work any better then than it did when you were trying spontaneously? At least if you get 10 and 8 of them are mature and 6 of them fertilize and you end up with 1 or 2, well, then we've got the 1 or 2 that we were trying to get. Mm-hmm. We've got a reason for having done the IVF. So yes, it's a test, it's diagnostic, but it's not a test or diagnostic in the same way as other tests that we do are. It's a way of filtering out the best embryo for transfer. And if you only end up with 1, woohoo, we've got the one we need. That's why we did it.
Thank you for explaining it like that. I think that is reassuring for a lot of people.
And we also have to remember that when we collect eggs, so what we're doing is remember the 3-month thing I did here with my hands, they were recruited 3 months ago and they've been growing up for 3 months. We jump in here 2.5 weeks beforehand and keep that cohort growing. So we're not taking from the pool of eggs that you were born with. We're taking from the pool of eggs that were recruited 3 months ago, that your body would have discarded all of them bar 1. So in a spontaneous ovulation system, you would have only ovulated 1 of those eggs. But we're keeping more of them growing to give them effectively an apprenticeship in the lab to show us what they're made of, with the expectation that most of them are actually going to be shit, because your body would have discarded them anyway. Only 1 of them would have been ovulated. We're hoping that maybe more than 1 of them is going to make a nice embryo.
All right, I have one more question.
Okay, go. Sorry.
What advice would you give to people that are in this space just to perhaps shed some reassurance or some positivity around their journey?
Most people eventually have success. Overwhelmingly, most people eventually end up with a baby. No, take that one back. Most people eventually have success. That success is not always a baby. Sometimes that success is an answer, a closure, a choice. And if you are at the point where you've had multiple failed cycles, you must try to eliminate from your vocabulary the words giving up, because you are not giving up. You are choosing a different pathway. You can keep doing IVF for as long as you want to, as long as you can afford to. Eventually, you need to make a choice to do what you want to do. And that choice might be donor eggs, it might be adoption, it might be fostering, it might be being childless, it might be walking the Camino Trail, it might be breeding Shih Tzus, it might be climbing Mount Everest. It could be anything, but it is a choice. It is not giving up.
Thank you. Lucy, I just wish that I had known you when I was struggling through my own journey many years ago. And I just wish that everyone who is on their own path at the moment could hear this and get this information from you, because it is so invaluable and so hard to find. So where can people learn more about you? If they want to get in touch, learn about your services, what's the best place to find you?
I hang out most on Instagram. I'm there far too much. I have my phone glued to my hand and I really need to practice some boundaries. But you can find me on Instagram at 2 Lines Fertility. I run very regular Q&As on there. I really just actually want to help you. And that's where you'll find me hanging out. I post a lot of very, very good free content there. To chew up. If you are looking for some really specific information tailored to you, then obviously I do the one-on-one consultations. I also have a number of courses and programs. So if you're looking for the toxins information, there's a 6-week detox program on my website that takes you through it's not a detox, it's not a juice cleanse, it's not a fast, it's how to actually learn about what these toxins really are and what I can actually do about it as a whole of life kind of thing, not just a short process thing. There's a preparing for conception course, and there is something very exciting soon to be released. So come and join my IVF membership. Woo! You heard it here exclusively first.
Well, I will put all the links to all of those in the show notes. Lucy, thank you so much for being here, honestly. And just if you are not following Lucy, what are you doing on your journey? Please do yourself a favor. And I will connect with you again really soon. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me. See ya.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode today. I feel like I could speak to Lucy for hours, just picking her brain about everything that she knows. And I really hope that you got a lot out of that conversation. Now, on the next episode of the podcast, I will be sharing the 5 types of exercise that you need to avoid if you're trying to conceive. And this is so important for synchronizing your hormones and supporting your overall preconception health. So until then, sending you all my love as you continue your own journey to fertility. The most common thing I hear from students who are on their fertility journey is that the stress of trying to conceive has taken over their life. Your days end up being filled with endless appointments, navigating pregnancy announcements. You're trying to eat right, take all your supplements, and it is all you think about from the moment you wake up. I designed the Element Fertility Yoga course to support your body, your mind, and your mental health in 3 important ways: to synchronize your hormones, increase circulation and blood flow, and to help regulate your nervous system. But on top of this, the greatest gift that you can give yourself throughout this journey is a sense of peace, to help you calm your mind and just make this process feel easier. Every single one of my students tell me that this is the first thing they notice after starting a yoga, meditation, and breathwork practice. But on top of this, you have the amazing benefit of actually supporting and increasing your fertility. Studies have shown that those participating in mind-body programs as they're trying to conceive have success rates 3 times greater than those who don't. The course I've designed walks you through natural conception as well as fertility treatments and IVF cycles. And the best part is you can work through it at your own pace in the comfort of your home. The practices start from just 10 minutes per day. To learn more, visit elementpilatesyoga.com or see the link in the show notes.